College, Charles Wallace is here for the second message in our series, Jonah Swallowed by Grace. Have fun.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you what, it is a blessing to be here, you know. I only had to drive 2 hours, so it's not that bad. It was a small little drive. Like Bruce said, I'm continuing on in the series of Jonah, and last week you guys kind of went over the idea of the fact that Jonah turns away from God's mission, right? And then he gets eaten by a fish. Well, that's kind of where we're starting today. You know, when Jonah is in the belly of that fish. There are moments, first of all, how many of you guys use social media in some way or form, whether it's Facebook or something? Yeah? I mean, I do. I'm on social media too much, actually. I know, you post every 10 minutes. But there are moments in life that doesn't really show up on social media. You know, nobody posts about it. Nobody celebrates it. And nobody even plans for it, really. But almost everyone here, everyone in the world experiences it. It's the moment when everything collapses inward. Not just a bad day, not just a bad moment, not just a rough season, but it's a moment when you realize that you are no longer in control, where your decisions have caught up with you, when your strength is no longer enough, when your excuses stop working. And you find yourself in a place you never thought that you were ever going to be. Alone. Stuck. Exposed. And in that moment, there's a question that rises above everything else. What do I do now? What am I going to do? And that's exactly where Jonah is in chapter 2. He's not on a boat anymore. He's no longer able to run. He's not arguing with God. He's at the bottom. And what we learn in that moment doesn't apply to just Jonah, right? It applies to every single one of us who's ever hit rock bottom. So today we're going to be reading from the book of Jonah, chapter 2, which says, verse 1, Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the belly of the fish. There it is. I called to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me. I cried out for help from deep inside Sheol. You heard my voice. When you throw me into the depths, into the heart of the sea, the currents overcame me. All your breakers and your billows swept over me. And I said, I have been banished from your sight. Yet I will look once more towards your holy temple. The water engulfed me up to the neck. The watery depths overcame me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. I sank to the foundations of the mountain. The earth's gates shut behind me forever. Then you raised my life from the pit, Lord my God. As my life was fading away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you, to your holy temple. Those who cherish worthless idols abandon their faithful love. But as for me, I will sacrifice to you with a voice of thanksgiving. I will fulfill what I vowed. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Then the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Now, the major thing that we see in Jonah chapter 2, it tells us to turn back to the Lord, especially in your lowest moments, because he alone hears you. He restores you, and he deserves your full surrender. Now, let's look at what Jonah shows us that makes us do that. The first thing that we see in Jonah is that God hears you at your lowest place. Now, I can safely say that because Jonah is praying from the most unlikely place imaginable. the belly of a great fish. That's gotta stink. This is not just symbolic language meant to soften the moment. This is real. There is real physical suffocating, it's a real physical suffocating, disorienting environment. There is no light. There is no sense of direction, no ability to move freely, and no control over what happens next. And even deeper than the physical reality is the spiritual one. Jonah knows exactly the reason that he's here. This isn't random suffering. It's not unexplained. This is a direct result of Jonah running from God. And that matters because it means Jonah can't blame anyone else. He is the one. He can't blame the sailors. He can't blame the storm. He can't blame the circumstances on anyone but himself. He's sitting in the consequences of his own rebellion. And yet, this is where the text says Jonah prayed. Not before the storm. Not on the ship. Not when God first called him. But here, at the bottom of the ocean, in the belly of a fish. And what is astonishing is not just that Jonah prays, it's that God listens to him. Because if we're honest, this is kind of where we often misunderstand God. We assume that God listens best when we are at our best, when we are consistent, when we are disciplined, when we are spiritually on track. But Jonah reveals something deeper about God's character. God is not limited to hearing you at your best. He's willing to hear you at your worst. And not only that, he's paying attention in that place. Jonah says, I called out and you answered me. That means God was not distant. He was not ignoring. He was not delaying. He was present in the belly of a fish, listening and responding. And notice something else. Jonah's prayer is not polished. It's not structured like a normal formal prayer. It's not calm. It's not measured. It's desperate. It's full of phrases like, I am driven away. The waters closed in on me. And the seaweed was wrapped around my head. This is not a composed prayer. He didn't spend time writing this down. This was a survival prayer. And yet, God receives it. Which means something incredibly important for us. That God does not require perfect words. He just responds to a genuine cry. And that honestly changes everything. Because that means in your lowest moment is not the place when God turns away from you. It's often the place where God finally has your full attention. And when he has your attention, he has the opportunity to begin transformation. This reminds me of back in 2010 when 33 miners were trapped deep underground after a catastrophic collapse. They were buried over 2,000 feet below the surface. Now, at first, no one knew if they were alive. Days passed with no contact. Families, they waited for an answer. Rescuers continued to drill, but there was no confirmation that they were even alive. No one knew if they were alive. Underground, those miners were in total darkness. Food was almost rationed to nothing. Time, it lost its complete meaning. The psychological pressure was overwhelming. I mean, I would be bummed out. I would have assumed the worst. They had no way to climb out, no way to signal clearly, and no way in their own ability to fix their situation. All those 33 men could do was wait and hope and respond when something reached them. Then, after 17 days, a drill finally broke through to where they were. And one of the miners tied a note to the drill bit that read, "We are well in the shelter, the 33." Now that note changed everything for both the people inside the mine, but also the rescuers, the families, the friends. Because now they knew that they're still alive, that it was possible to reach them. And from that moment on, the entire rescue operation focused on bringing them up. Now, here's why that matters. Those miners were completely unable to save themselves, but they were not beyond being reached. And the moment communication was established, rescue became possible. In the same way, when you cry out to God, even from your lowest place, you are informing him of where you are. He already knows. But you are opening the line of the relationship. You're saying, I'm still here. I need help. And God responds to that cry every single time. Now, I don't know you guys very well. I see you guys once a year. But some of you might be in that place right now. You feel buried under decisions. You feel trapped in patterns. You feel surrounded by your consequences. And the thought in your mind is this: I got myself into this, so I have to get myself out of this. But Jonah chapter 2 shows us that's not how that works. You don't get yourself out. You call out. And when you call out, God hears you. Not because you deserve it. None of us deserve a single thing from God. But because he is merciful. So stop waiting until you feel worthy. Stop waiting until you feel ready. Because you never will be. Call out now. Because when God hears, he doesn't remain passive. Instead, he restores you when you turn to him. The next section, Jonah describes his conditions as being in a pit. That word carries the idea of finality. It's the final strike. A place that you don't come back from. A place that closes over you. And from Jonah's perspective, this is it. He's dead. He's as far as safety as he's ever been. As far as purpose as he's ever been. And as far from obedience as he's ever been. And yet in the middle of all that, he says, "Yet you brought up my life from the pit." The word "yet" is really everything here. Because it introduces the intervention of God into a hopeless situation. Jonah is essentially saying, I was finished, but then you stepped in. And this is where we see the difference between human effort and divine grace. If restoration depended on Jonah, there would be no chapter 2. He has no leverage, no strength, no plan. He would have remained at the bottom of the ocean. But restoration does not depend on Jonah, does not depend on you. It depends on God. However, and this is critical, God's restoration is not disconnected from God's response, Jonah's response. Jonah begins to recognize truth. He acknowledges God's hand in everything. He rejects empty idols. And he declares God as the source of salvation. Now, this is not just emotional desperation. This is a spiritual realignment. Now, his heart is starting to turn. And where there is genuine turning, there's the beginning of restoration. Now here's what we need to understand. Restoration is not just about getting you out of trouble. It's about bringing you back into alignment with God. God is not interested in simply making your life easier. He is committed to making your life right. And sometimes the lowest point is the only place where realignment can happen, because it's the only place where your pride finally breaks. Now, consider the life of Chuck Colson. Now, if you guys don't know who he was one of the most powerful men in the United States during the presidency of Richard Nixon. He was known as Nixon's hatchet man. He was ruthless, strategic, and deeply involved in political maneuvering. But when Watergate happened, everything for him collapsed. His reputation was destroyed. His power disappeared, and his future was honestly uncertain. He didn't know where he was going from there. And eventually, he was sentenced to prison time. Now, from the outside, looking in, it looked like it was the end of the significance of his life. But inside that lowest moment, everything changed for him. A friend shared the gospel with him. And for the first time, Colson stopped defending himself. He stopped justifying his actions. And he acknowledged his need for God. He later described breaking down in tears as he realized the weight of his sin and the depth of God's grace. And that moment, in his lowest moment, became the turning point for the rest of his life. After prison, instead of fading in obscurity, he founded Prison Fellowship, a ministry that has impacted thousands of inmates around the world. But here's the point. God didn't get him out of trouble. He still had to face that prison time. But after, he restored his life with a new purpose. And that restoration began when Colson turned away from his sin. Now, some of you guys, once again, I don't know you guys very well, you're trying to write your own restoration story. You're trying to fix your own reputation, fix your habits, fix your situation. And I guarantee you it's exhausting, because restoration was never meant to come from your efforts alone. It begins when you turn back to God. Not halfway, not conditionally, but fully. And when you do, God begins a work that you can never accomplish on your own. But with restoration comes responsibility. So that's why God deserves your full surrender moving forward. Once he restores you, he deserves your full surrender. Jonah reaches a point in this prayer where everything becomes clear. He says, salvation belongs to the Lord. This is not just a theology book statement. It's a surrender statement. It means that I am no longer in control. I am not the source of my rescue. My life is not ultimately mine. And that realization changes how Jonah responds moving forward. He says, what I have vowed, I will pay. In other words, I will follow through, I will obey you, and I will submit to you. And this is where many people struggle, because they want God's intervention in their life, but they don't want his authority. They want rescue, but overall, they don't want to surrender. But Jonah shows us that true transformation happens when we move from wanting God to fix our situation to allowing God to lead our lives. And that shift is honestly everything. Because without surrender, we often return to the same patterns that led us to the bottom in the first place. Surrender is what breaks the cycle. Now, I read a book recently about old Olympians. You know, I like learning about history. And one that really popped in my mind was Eric Liddell. I hope I'm saying that right. He was a world-class athlete in the 1924 Olympics. He had every opportunity to build fame, to build wealth, and to build recognition. But he made a decision that shocked many. He refused to run a race on a Sunday because of his conviction to honor God. Now, that decision cost him almost everything in that moment. But it revealed something deeper, that his life was not his own. Now, after the Olympics, instead of capitalizing on his success, getting brand deals, he chose to become a missionary in China. He gave up comfort, recognition, and opportunity to follow God's calling. Now, sadly, eventually, he died in a Japanese internment camp during World War II. Now, from a worldly perspective, that might seem like a loss. But from a biblical perspective, it is a picture of complete surrender. He gave up every single thing that he had to follow God's calling. He understood something that Jonah was just beginning to grasp. If salvation belongs to the Lord, then my life belongs to him too. God did not bring you out of the pit just so you can go back living the same way. He brought you out to bring you into something new. And that requires surrender. Not partial surrender, not temporary surrender, not selective surrender, full surrender. Your decisions, your directions, your future, everything, it belongs to God. So turn back to the Lord, especially in your lowest moments, because He alone hears you, restores you, and deserves your full surrender. Jonah's story turns into the darkest place in his life. Not when things got better, but when his heart changed. And for some of you, that moment might be right now. Right now can be that turning point. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to keep running. You don't have to fix everything first. You just have to turn back to God. You may have hit the bottom, but God still hears you. God is still going to restore you. And God is still calling you to surrender. Dear Heavenly Father, I just pray for our surrender, that everyone here, no matter what moment they are in their life, that they just remember to surrender to you. That through your goodness comes everything great. Lord, I just once again thank you for the time I got to spend here. I place in your Son's holy name. Amen.